and on 2 other persons, Mr. Mark Fulton, Mr. Andy McNee, and been reliably informed that members of the RAR even and the British Army receive 50 crown bonuses in their paychecks if they stop me, search me, and search my QR and do a sighting report.
Who provided that man, or who set that man up for you as a target?
Billy Wright.
Billy Wright, one of the most sinister figures to emerge from 30 years of violence. Do you feel that you can't be killed?
Oh, everyone can be killed. Everyone.
In the vicious landscape of the Northern Ireland Troubles, few names carried as much fear, reverence, and pure hatred as Billy King Rat Wright. He was a man who ruled the loyalist underworld of Mid-Ulster with an iron fist, a paramilitary commander whose ruthlessness was matched only by his savviness with the media. The Royal Ulster Constabulary, or RUC, officially tied him to the sectarian murders of up to 20 Catholics, though he was never actually convicted of any of them. He became a warlord, a cult hero, a fundamentalist preacher, and the founder of a splinter group so extreme it was cut loose by its own side. He was a paramilitary leader tied to dozens of murders, but his reign ended inside one of Europe's most secure prisons. The official story is that rival inmates killed him, but the truth might be far more sinister, involving catastrophic failures and allegations of a state-sanctioned execution. In the end, his reign didn't conclude on a dark country road or in a back-alley ambush. It ended in the one place he should have been safest. On December 27, 1997, inside the walls of HM Prison Maze, then one of Europe's most secure prisons, Billy Wright was shot dead by rival Republican prisoners. The killing was brazen, perfectly planned, and pulled off with shocking ease. It kicked off a firestorm of inquiries, a bloody wave of retaliatory sectarian attacks, and decades of lingering suspicion that someone on the inside had helped orchestrate his death. And to really understand how he died, you have to go back to the beginning of his bloody rise to power. William Stephen Wright was born on July 7, 1960, in Wolverhampton, England, to Protestant parents from Portadown, Northern Ireland. His parents, David and Sarah, had moved to England after a family dispute over local politics. They returned to Northern Ireland when Billy was 4, but his childhood was soon fractured. His parents' marriage disintegrated, and his mother left for England, never to see her children again. Wright and his 4 sisters were placed into the care system. He was raised in a children's home in Mountnorris, South Armagh, a predominantly nationalist area where he ironically played Gaelic games with local Catholic children. By the time he was a teenager, the Troubles were tearing the province apart. The area had become known as the Murder Triangles for the sheer volume of sectarian killings carried out by both Republican and Loyalist paramilitaries. This storm of violence quickly pulled the young Wright into the Loyalist cause. In 1975, at just 15 years old, he had already been in trouble for scrawling the initials of the Ulster Volunteer Force, or UVF, on a local school wall. That same year, he officially joined the group's Portadown unit. He would later claim that the IRA's 1976 Kingsmill massacre was his primary motivation. In that attack, gunmen stopped a minibus of Protestant textile workers, ordered the sole Catholic man to flee, and then executed the remaining 10 men on the roadside.
He's seen standing here.
While Wright
with
often
one of
cited
his
this
closest
atrocity, reports suggest he was
UVF
already
killer
deeply
Mark.
involved with the UVF by then. He was inspired by, and would eventually succeed, Robin the Jackal Jackson, the notorious commander of the UVF's Mid-Ulster Brigade, a man linked to as many as 100 murders. It was the start of a journey that would turn a troubled teenager into one of the most feared men in Northern Ireland. After being convicted for possessing a firearm and hijacking a vehicle, Wright was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Upon his release in the early 1980s, his hatred for the state, which he blamed for failing to protect Protestants, had only deepened. He resumed his UVF activities around 1986 and quickly shot up through the ranks. In the early 1990s, he took over from the aging Robin Jackson as commander of the UVF's powerful and semi-independent Mid-Ulster Brigade. Operating from the Loyalist heartlands of Portadown and Lurgan, Wright commanded a unit that became known as the Rat Pack. This crew was infamously brutal, financing its operations by smuggling weapons from South Africa and waging a vicious campaign of sectarian murders against the local Catholic population. Wright carefully cultivated a menacing public image. A Belfast journalist popularized the nickname King Rat, which Wright initially hated but eventually embraced for the fear it generated. He began giving media interviews, staring down the camera and speaking with a sharp, if limited, political mind. In one chilling statement in 1991, he admitted that Catholics saw him as the devil but defended the random murder of civilians as a necessary deterrent to IRA violence. He presented himself as a protector of the Protestant people, a hard man for hard times, even as his unit was linked to some of the worst violence of the era. He was a puzzle, a supposed born-again Christian lay preacher who was, by all accounts, a cold-blooded killer.
I've been reliably informed that straight in Ulster, down in the Armagh City, that there's been a bank call made of £50, and on 2 other persons, Mr. Mark Folden, Mr. Andy McNee, and I've been reliably informed that members of the RAR even and the British Army receive £50 bonuses in their paychecks if they stop me, search me, and search my QR and do a signing report. Well, they can't sit idly by and allow their people to be murdered and allow political leverage to be gained from violence. It's not a fair choice, and they certainly do not deserve it, but nevertheless they're duty bound to protect their people and their country.
Even if it means more deaths of innocent people.
Even if it means their deaths.
Because there were incidents involving Loyalist Paramilitaries where it was just innocent Catholic people who were being singled out.
Well, I'm on record as stating that I do not agree, and I don't believe the leadership would agree, that innocent nationalists should lose their lives in any conflict. However, I'm on record that during the war, I support the right of the Loyalist people to defend themselves, to take direct action against the IRA.
While notorious in paramilitary circles, Billy Wright became a household name across Northern Ireland during the Drumcree standoffs of 1995 and 1996. The conflict centered on the Orange Order's demand to march its traditional parade route from Drumcree Church down the mostly Catholic Garvaghey Road in Portadown. To residents, the march felt like a sectarian victory lap. To the Orangemen, it was a fundamental right. The 1995 standoff saw around 10,000 loyalists facing off against 1,000 police officers for days, leading to riots and the closure of the port of Larne. The following year, the situation escalated further. Wright put himself right in the middle of the action. Even though he wasn't in the Orange Order, he became a key figure at the protest barricades. These were reinforced with everything from construction diggers to a slurry tanker filled with gasoline, ready to be used as a makeshift flamethrower against security forces. He was photographed shaking hands with Orange Order leaders and even held talks with David Trimble, the leader of the Ulster Unionist Party, who had previously denounced him as a gangster. For many hardcore loyalists, Wright's refusal to back down was heroic. Ballads were written in his honor, and his image as the victor of Drumcree cemented his status as a loyalist icon. But his open defiance and rising celebrity put him on a collision course with his own bosses in the UVF, who were cautiously trying to navigate the emerging peace process. The UVF, and other major paramilitary groups, had declared a ceasefire in 1994. Wright, however, was staunchly opposed to the peace process, viewing it as a sellout and a surrender to Republicans. His fundamentalist religious and political views hardened. He began publicly attacking the UVF's Belfast leadership and their political allies, the Progressive Unionist Party, accusing them of being communists and traitors. The breaking point came in July 1996, at the height of the Second Drumcree crisis. Wright's unit shattered the ceasefire with a series of attacks, including the brutal murder of Michael McGoldrick, a 31-year-old Catholic taxi driver who had just graduated from university. The killing was apparently ordered by Wright to undermine the UVF leadership, and one of his men chillingly referred to it as a birthday present for him. The UVF leadership was furious. On August 2, 1996, they publicly expelled Wright and his Portadown unit. They issued a death threat, stating that failure to leave Northern Ireland would result in summary justice. Wright flatly refused. At a massive rally in Portadown, with prominent supporters like Democratic Unionist Party politician William McRae by his side, he defiantly stood his ground. with most of his Mid-Ulster units still loyal, he created his own paramilitary group, the Loyalist Volunteer Force, or LVF. The LVF was an extremist faction even by paramilitary standards, waging a gruesome campaign of random attacks on Catholic civilians while also making money from extortion and drug trafficking. By forming the LVF, Billy Wright hadn't just declared war on Republicans, but on the Loyalist establishment, too. He was now a marked man, a renegade whose violence threatened to derail a fragile peace process. His time was running out. In March 1997, Wright was finally taken off the streets, convicted for threatening to kill a woman who was set to testify against 2 of his men. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison. But being locked up didn't stop him. He was sent to the Maze prison, where he immediately demanded, and controversially got, a separate wing just for LVF prisoners. Irish officials and other inmates warned that this would only inflate Wright's importance and undermine the more moderate Loyalist leaders in the jail. From his cell, Wright continued to direct the LVF's deadly business on the outside, and membership of the group actually increased. But inside the Maze, a new and fatal threat was closing in. The authorities had placed the LVF in the same H-block as prisoners from the Irish National Liberation Army, the INLA, a small but ruthless Republican faction that was violently opposed to Wright and everything he stood for. The morning of December 27, 1997, should have been routine. Just before 10 a.m., Billy Wright was sitting in a prison van, waiting to be driven from his block to the visiting area for a visit with his girlfriend. In that moment, 3 INLA prisoners, Christopher McWilliams, John Kennaway, and John Glennon, sprang their meticulously planned trap. They had managed to smuggle at least 2 guns into the prison, a semi-automatic pistol and a .22 Derringer. The assassins cut through a wire fence in a section that was not covered by security cameras, scrambled onto a low roof, and dropped down into the forecourt where the van was parked. It was a shockingly bold move. One man held the driver hostage while another ripped open the van's side door and opened fire on Wright. According to the official inquiry, Wright turned to face his killers, lashing out even as at least 6 bullets struck his body. The final shot tore through his aorta. Billy King Rat Wright was dead at 37. The killers surrendered immediately. Their sentences were ultimately short-lived, as they were released early under the terms of the 1998 Good Friday Agreement. The assassination triggered fury and a fresh wave of retaliatory sectarian murders by the LVF. It also launched a massive, multi-million-pound public inquiry that uncovered a long list of serious failings by the prison authorities. It was revealed that the INLA men who killed Wright had previously orchestrated a hostage-taking incident at another prison in an attempt to murder him there, yet they were transferred to the same block in the Maze anyway. One of the killers later described the prison security as a joke, claiming they could get alcohol weekly and that another prisoner had even smuggled in a puppy. In death, Billy Wright became a martyr for a brand of loyalism that refused to bend. His face became an icon, staring out from murals in hardline Protestant neighborhoods, a symbol of defiance for young loyalists who felt betrayed by the peace process. His funeral was a massive paramilitary spectacle, and he was buried in Portadown's Seago Cemetery. But his legacy is a bitter one. To his victims and the nationalist community, he was a sectarian monster, a man responsible for unimaginable pain and at least 20 deaths. To this day, his death raises uncomfortable questions about whether the state was complicit. His own father, David Wright, campaigned for years for a public inquiry, convinced that authorities who saw Wright as an obstacle to peace simply looked the other way. The £30 million Wright inquiry ultimately found no evidence of state collusion. However, it did confirm catastrophic failures and a series of negligent acts that collectively rendered the assassination feasible. The story of Billy Wright remains a powerful symbol of the raw brutality of the Troubles, and a reminder of the long shadows that still hang over Northern Ireland's uneasy peace. If this dive into the dark corners of history is what you're here for, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this.